Rosanne is going to be delivering her information on Detroit Publishing Company.
Anyway, I'm doing this on the Detroit Publishing Company for the photochromes or Phostints slides. They were incorporated here in this country. It's owned by the photochrome process was owned by the Photoglobe Company of Zurich, Switzerland. A photographer named Huscher had heard about them and then tried to get it all together and found support with a pair of brothers in Detroit. And that's how the name came into being. And so here's the group. The picture of the watch, it was to Huscher from the heads of the Photoglobe Company when Huscher retired in 1902. And then the photograph is of the various photographers and the two Livingston brothers. And in the middle is William Henry Jackson with his feet on two steps. After Huscher retired or left the company in 1902, Jackson took over as plant manager and he became director, plant manager, and photographer. Before he was just like photographer. Richard Livingston became the director after the death of his brother William in 1924. Now, William Henry Jackson, he got to be part of this because he was a very prolific photographer, had participated in the Hayden expedition, had worked with Hayden during the Civil War, and had literally thousands and thousands of photographs. And his photographs actually helped to establish the Antiquities Act of 1906. And this was after the government created Yellowstone as the first national park in 1872. He joined the DPC after meeting with Huscher, who he had known for years. Basically, Huscher had gone to Jackson because he wanted to take advantage of Jackson's glass plate collection. I had discovered these. I actually did my master's thesis on the glass plate negatives. I had done a National Museum Act internship at the Colorado History Center. And whenever I'd be sent to get an image from the glass plates, I noticed how beautiful they were. And at that time, it was called the William Henry Jackson Glass Negative Collection. But when I went back to do research on the collection 2 years later, in the meantime, the attribution list had been found. I was the first person to look at the attribution list, and I'm actually listed in this little book because I was the first person. So my thesis also for the California negatives actually had all the correct attributions. Unfortunately for us, they don't use the same numbers for postcards as they do for the negatives. But the other thing about Jackson is that his great-grandson is, how many of you read or have read, I don't know if he's still doing it, the Zippy, the Conehead? Are you all familiar with Griffey? Okay. Griffey's real name is William Henry Griffin, and his mother was Jackson's granddaughter. And so I had contacted Griffey and spoke with him about 10 years ago or so. And he was just wonderful and kind and pleasant. And I was thinking about that today, about just how you never know with someone what they're going to be like. So anyway, so I included on here because of the national parks for Yellowstone, a couple images of Yellowstone. The Detroit Publishing Company also had retail stores. Now, the first picture is of a postcard rack that they had for shops, that someone could order it. And then the two other pictures are of their New York City store. But they had postcard shops in Boston and Denver and Los Angeles. And, so the major cities they had stores in. They also had these things called little Phostint journeys. And they were boxed collections. And I have one here that I got, Minds of the Southwest. And it's missing a card. They should have 40 cards. And typically people, especially when someone's selling it, they'll stick another card in. Hopefully they pay attention to what's in there already and what the topic of the pack is. These are all pictures of my little pack of my Phostint's journeys, which is on the Southwest. So it's primarily Arizona, New Mexico, and Colorado. And there are a few of California's, but of the desert. Then they also have other items. And so one is called Phostint Views, and this one is on Detroit, and it's just images of Detroit, but the decorations that are just so lovely. And then the other thing they had available is a postcard album, which was just a small 7x9 little book that you would then use those corners to keep your cards in place. It wouldn't hold that many, so it wouldn't be for a big collector like we might have, but it's still a nice start, a nice little way to keep your images. So then there's the postcard backs. I'm not going to explain them all, but the two on the right, they have Roman numerals at the bottom of the bar that divides the two sides, and that's what the arrows point to. So they'd be like X, B, something. So it actually goes to, saying that it was made in 1903 or something like that, 1905. But for many more years, it was just the undivided private mailing card back. The early cards were the F series in 1898 when the company started, and then the G series in 1899, the following year. They were a little bit smaller than most of the noted postcards. They were 3 1/4 by 5 1/2, unnumbered. And the messages could only be written on the side with the picture. On this series, they'd have 2 or 3 different images on the card. When I write penny postcards, that's, as we all know, the stamp price for them. F series went F 1 to 92, and the G series went 1 to 35. So it wasn't that huge amount. And so then there's also the 1000 series, and these are like they're in the hundreds, so they're below 1000 in the numbers, and the information appears near the image, so it's not with the border the way that the later pictures would have been. The 3 of mine that I have on here, no one wrote on the image. They probably just mailed it. I didn't bother getting them out of the box and looking at them. And then there's the 5000 series. The 5000 series, which was in 1901, there's a big gap between the 1000 and then jumping to the 5000. The numbers here, and on this one, you can see someone wrote on the border of the picture there. And it was basically the 5,000 series. They would just add the 5 in front of the 3-digit number that the others were. So I'm just going to flip back. So each of these, let's see, I think they're like 151, so it would be 5151, or 223, so it would be 5223. So that's how they would renumber their items for the 5,000 series. The 6,000 series, and I don't know if you can actually see on the office building, there's glitter on it. And this is the Department of War and of Justice in Washington, D.C. that they decorated with glitter. Glitter is something that was a short-lived popular item, and they had to stop because it was poisoning the postal workers because it was so toxic. And then the others are of, again, of Wyoming, of Yellowstone. And then the 7,000 series from 1903 to 1904, the image with the steam, that's steamy over there, is of Yellowstone, and the other two are from Catalina Island. So that's Avalon Bay and then a flying fish. With the 8,000 series in 1904, 1905, they stopped using the Detroit photographic name and began using Detroit Publishing. They changed the palette on the card to the smaller one. And I think it's because the borders were getting smaller and smaller. The photo on the left is of Havana, and the other two are San Francisco. And then the 9,000 series is when they really began using Detroit Publishing pretty much exclusively at this time. I'm going to backtrack just a little here because I see this one with the people picking oranges. And that is, I had found on the Bay Area Postcard Club website something about Charles Widmer's cards. The person who wrote it, I guess, had issues with the Detroit Publishing Company because at the end, and it was just a really bad image, meaning he could have made it that bad. But because the thing about the Detroits, as most people know, I mean, Mitchells are wonderful, Detroits are wonderful, the Widmars are wonderful, but a lot of it is because of the process that prints them. So they're always registered just right. And that's really important. And all three of those companies I know do that. The 10,000 series is from 1906, 1907, and the backs were switched to divided backs during this series here, so during the 10,000 series. So we have 2 there from Wyoming, or from Yellowstone, I mean, and then 2 there from the Grand Canyon. And I'm still trying to figure out here why there's just this big thing of white. It wasn't colored, but I haven't been to the Grand Canyon in years. I was in my 20s. To give you an idea of how long ago it was. I think that it could be that there were places that just weren't as colorful as we think of. And then the 11,000 series, which was in use in 1907, 1908. All the backs were divided backs. They also had the card numbers. They don't go, it's not like all Los Angeles or all San Francisco, all the way down, or all New York City. They bounce around. So it might be 1 or 2 of Los Angeles and 3 or 4 of New York City, and then back to some Los Angeles. So it's very haphazard in how the numbers are. And the 12,000 series, again, all the card backs are divided backs. but they've added Phostint to the back of all the cards, and they stopped using the palette on the front because it just doesn't fit in those tiny borders. And that was 1908, 1909. This building here is the Carnegie Library in San Diego. We've gone through 2 or 3 more libraries since that one was built. Dam is the Sweetwater Dam, which is actually just kind of straight south of where I live. It's a nice place to walk, except for you can't walk on the walkway there any longer since actually 9/11, because they worry about not someone falling in, but of someone doing something to the water. And then the picture with the oranges in the front, Riverside County really looks like that, especially this year when they got so much snow. I had gone up to Riverside with a friend, and I just was like, wow, look at all that snow. There was so much of it on the mountains. We do get oranges and snow. The 14,000 series is one that it's assorted cards with Life Publishing, which is cards that are kind of goofy, like silly lines, things like that. And there are works of art, sepias, black and white prints, and a small amount of them are Phostint views. Of the 1,000 in the series, there's maybe 200 or 300 that are the regular cards. 50,000 series are actually the lithographs, which are larger than the postcards, and they have, in many cases, are the same image as the postcards. The difference is with the postcards, they basically do 4 screenings, whereas for the lithographs, there's 9. That's where you see the really intense colors. They really do just have punch to them. They kind of go at you. And so I don't have any of them, so I didn't put any in there. Oh, and that's a little backstory I'm going to tell right now. I had mentioned that I had done my master's thesis on the glass plates, and all the years I kept thinking I want to do a book on this. And so I contacted the Denver, it's now called History Colorado. I asked them about using the images, and they were, well, it's $450 per image to use them. And so I kind of went, what? And then I had an epiphany and just kind of went, I could start collecting postcards, and even at the most expensive, at $10 or so, I could have use of many postcards to put this together. And unfortunately, I never was able to do it because right around the same time I found out I had cancer. So I just haven't been able to do anything. The 60,000 series is the art reproduction group, and they are standard postcard stock and mainly in black and white or sepia. They're not the color. These are pretty kind of boring. Then there was also the 70,000, the 71,000, and the 72,000 series. And then at the end of the 72,000 series in 1932, by 1932, they were having a lot of financial issues because people used phones. They weren't using the postcards as much any longer. They started switching to contract series, which would be like, for a hotel who just wanted a series of images of the hotel. They also had a railroad car, and I love these. I couldn't find, there's an image I have somewhere showing the car in front of the Hotel del Coronado, and I couldn't find it when I was looking for it. So I have it somewhere. I just have to find it. These are the references. And so I do have a list here, and then also the online resources and a little bit about the Henry Ford Museum. When the Detroit company closed down, they gave everything to the Henry Ford. Jackson's son, Clarence, wanted it to go to Colorado. So everything west of the Mississippi, he convinced them to send it to Colorado History Center, and everything east of the Mississippi went to the Library of Congress. Frankly, it's much easier to use the Library of Congress site. And they are who got the postcards. If you need to research, that's a big difference between the two. And also, Kurt Tyke is another resource online. And unfortunately, the Denver Library, when the Colorado History Center remodeled about 10 years ago, actually a little more than that. I know when I was last in Denver, it was 2009, and they were closed. Everything was moved over to Denver and to the library, but you can still go online and go through the images at the Denver Library. You can't through History Colorado. How many of you knew that Walker Evans, the photographer, was a postcard collector? So this book I have, it was actually it's the exhibition guide to the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York's exhibit on Walker Evans' collection. He was an only child, and so when he went with his parents on vacations, he started collecting postcards then. And he said that it was a good way for him to see like the purity of an image. So it actually taught him how to take pictures. Anyway, I think that's it. Thank you. Any questions?
Thank you, Roseanne. That was wonderful.
Oh, well, thank you.
Absolutely.
Yeah, you've really got a lot of information on a publisher. Thanks for sharing that. And I couldn't understand what you meant about the palette and how it changed.
Oh, okay. Let me find it here. I do. The first slide actually had the palettes on them.
I just hadn't heard that terminology before.
These are the palettes.
Oh, okay.
So
maybe I'm the only one that, oh, I see. I have run into those before.
Yeah. So one is the publishing company and one is the photographic company. Those are the two. These are what the palettes are.
Yeah.
And any other questions? I can't see everyone here, so.
I was going to ask you, you'd mentioned that the Library of Congress has a lot of these cards. Is that a site that you can go on and actually pull up the images and actually study them? Is that?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, thank you. I was curious about that. That was really interesting. They made a lot of postcards, obviously, and
Oh yeah, they made 30,000 different postcards and produced 7 million postcards a year.
Yeah, the one question I had is, I've got a pretty good collection. I know Bob has a fantastic collection of postcards on Yellowstone National Park, but most of the ones that I've seen of Yellowstone are from Hain, and I was just wondering if they use the same photographer. I don't know. Bob probably knows more about this than me.
Well, Hayes actually was friends with Jackson, and originally Detroit, the Jackson images were used for the park. And then as time went by, Hayes decided he was going to get into the postcard business. And, just the whole thing of he could, I could save money. I could make more money, that kind of thing. I've been selling all these postcards. I could do it myself, and went ahead and did that. There was a break between them.
Okay.
Can I say something, Shaw?
Absolutely, please.
Okay, I have got a story on these Detroit cards. They are, Rosanne did really mention, I think they're by far the best photographed cards that were made in America. And when I ever got them in my collection, I was always very pleased to get them because they're so lovely. I'd also mention that the Photoglobe company in Surrey, or wherever it was in Switzerland, produced beautiful postcards in that time also using the photochrome method. They're just beautiful cards of the Alps and so on.
Okay, and that's something else I want to share with everyone. The agreement is they only have the right to North America. The Photoglobe company of Zurich has the European rights. There was another company in England who had other rights. But the way you can tell which ones later were made in Switzerland is that they were red borders, red type on the borders. That's one way to differentiate. I found some with blue type, and I still haven't figured out what the blue type indicates. It could be those are the ones from England. I don't know. They are just beautiful. And I had mentioned about Walker Evans. His thing was that the best cards were the Detroits.
Beautiful cards. That was a great job, Roseanne. We appreciate that very, very much.